Hello, welcome to Sean Matthews, The Real Deal. I have a special guest on here with me today, and I would love to introduce him. His name is Dr. Ian Kaminsky, and he runs the Melbourne NLP Hypnosis Center, where they help clients overcome challenges and excel. They work with clients individually, helping them either overcome many forms of negative behavior like quit smoking, weight loss, drink less, depression, and sugar addiction, or help them improve their performance in areas like sports, sales, and exams. They also work with groups of business owners to help improve their business mindset and therefore their productivity, performance, and ultimately their business profits. Oh, amazing. I love your work, Ian, and it's so good to connect with you here on the podcast today. How are you today?
I'm awesome, and it's just great to be here with you, Sean. Thank you so much for inviting me to be with you today, and welcome to all our listeners.
Thank you. Yes, welcome all listeners. Now I'm going to go through a few questions, but it's going to be more of an interactive episode, because Ian and I, we like to talk about different things. Ian and I met through a networking event, so we do like to talk. Let me have a look. Just give me 1 minute, Ian. So, Ian, how are you, and who is Ian? What's the story? Your background? Are you a doctor? In your title, it says Dr. Ian Kaminsky.
Yes,
that
I've
title?
sort of come from an unusual background, Sean, so I'm glad you began with this one. I've actually come from an engineering background of all things. I did actually a PhD in engineering. And people always say, well, how the hell did you get into what you're doing now from an engineering background? And I suppose the story there was in Melbourne, this is going back into the early 90s, we had a lot of forced amalgamations between a lot of the tertiary institutions. And it meant that there were many of these which just didn't work. And I was actually in one of these where there just was a clash of cultures. And unfortunately, the sort of side that I was actually on was on the losing side of the sort of battle of cultures. And so I was sort of doing my PhD, but the politics just got uglier and uglier and uglier as the years went by. Cut a long story short, I finished my PhD, and they just got to a point where, they were wanting to not reschedule, they were restructuring the actual department, they were cutting back, and I thought, well, I don't really want to stay here. It was just really nasty. And I thought also, given how old I was at the time, I was probably in my 40s, I thought, look, if I stay here any longer, I'm going to be stuck in academia for the rest of my life. And so I thought, if I'm going to escape, here's my opportunity. So I sort of launched out of that and just sort of, explored, one of my many passions, which actually was personal development and growth. And I've sort of been in this area then really ever since, and absolutely loving it.
Fantastic. So that was just yesterday then, Ian?
More or less, yes. That was about, this was back in 2007, I left the university, so it was a little while ago now.
Yeah, okay, wow. So you have had a bit of experience on this journey of personal development and growth, and as your sign says in the background, you do NLP and hypnosis training. Is that correct?
Yeah, so even as early as in the early 90s, for example, I was learning all about NLP. I sort of began really in the NLP space first. And in fact, funnily enough, this just happens to be purely coincidental, Sean. I'm actually catching up today with, in fact, the trainer who actually trained me back in the early 90s. He just happens to be in Melbourne. I'm catching up with him around 2. I'm going to have actually a ball talking a little about NLP and all his trainings that I've actually done, and just what I've been doing ever since. I'm really looking forward to that.
Wow, fantastic. Oh, that's incredible. So you're still in touch with your trainer, which is amazing. Definitely.
He was a lovely guy. We had a really good rapport, and I still stay in contact with many of my fellow colleagues, both from the hypnosis side of things and also on the NLP side too. So it's great fun to sort of stay in contact and share ideas and help each other grow and expand.
Definitely. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? Life is like that, which is fantastic. Now, you said you were an engineer. So, with your engineering background and NLP and hypnosis, do they intertwine in some way?
They do. I suppose if you sort of take out all the numerical, like, analysis and problem solving, where there's a strong, I suppose, link is in fact in the problem solving space. But rather than be focusing on engineering solutions and, mathematical formulas and all that sort of stuff, I'm dealing now, of course, more, with humans, with people, which is probably more complex, I think, in some respects than engineering problems. And, so I'm still applying my, say, researching, what's the underlying issues and just, being creative, formulating different, solutions for them to look at. I do a lot of, logging of clients' progress. So, sort of measuring what they're doing. So I suppose in a way, I'm applying some of those engineering thinking and skills, but I also sort of look at another way that I'm actually re-engineering people. That sort of makes sense, from
Oh,
the
yeah.
inside out.
Yeah,
So,
that's actually a good way of putting it.
yes, yes. So in a way, I'm sort of, I've got the engineering flavor still there, actually, in what I do today.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's fantastic. Absolutely amazing. So you did say when you got started, was there a moment in time when you said, I want to switch, and how you started your business in the first place? So was there a
Uh,
story? Does Ian have a story to tell?
well, it was probably more a case of, as I said, I finished at the university in 2007. I was looking at, well, what, where can I start? I was passionate about, personal growth and development. I've been learning about all this, really great NLP stuff, and I thought, well, there's got to be something I can sort of, start with, using the tools that I have. And the company that I was training with, they just introduced a brand new program, which was all to do with helping people stop smoking, using both NLP and hypnosis. And that sort of really caught my attention. I thought, well, let's at least start here and then just see how things unfold over time.
Mm,
And this is also a really great, I suppose, exposure to me, Sean, in the use of both of these tools together. It wasn't just hypnosis, it wasn't just NLP, but actually it was the two together, and they worked exceptionally well. And I thought, gee, this is a really nice recipe that, might thereby be applicable to all sorts of different issues and problems, challenges people have. And it's what I've sort of been thereby using really ever since.
mm. Wow. Yes, okay. So we've been talking a lot about NLP and hypnosis. Can you describe and explain what actually is NLP and how can it help people quit smoking and how can it help people lose weight?
Yeah, look, great question. When NLP was developed, this is back in the early 80s by John Grinder and his colleague, it took on a very different approach from most therapies of the time. Rather than focus on the problem, quit smoking, weight loss, drinking less, it focused more upon things like, well, who are the people who are the best performers in different fields of endeavor?
Mm-hmm.
And how can we actually use the process of modeling them, seeing what makes them so good at what they do, and thereby creating strategies and systems that actually help others replicate their types of performance and results. So it was very much initially built on modeling a couple of very, very famous therapists of the time. People, for example, like Milton Erickson, who was a famous hypnotherapist, Fritz Perl, who was a famous sort of Gestalt therapist, and
Mm-hmm.
also Virginia Satir was a very famous family therapist. And so they modeled them very carefully. And in fact, even to this very day, there are actually aspects of NLP that relate back to those early therapists that they modeled. For example, in NLP, we talk about, there's a thing called the Milton model, the Milton language patterns. There's also what's called the meta language model, which actually is based on Virginia Satir's work. And also at the master prac level, we also cover things like, timeline therapy. And that was actually born out of a lot of the work of Fritz Perl and his Gestalt therapies. So it sort of began originally with, what is excellence? How can we achieve excellence? And to achieve that, what are some of the things we have to overcome and go beyond, which is, where we then sort of focused on helping, clients with negative patterns of behavior they might have, or helping them go from where they are, but go, the next step to, where they actually would like to sort of be, whether that's sort of things like sales, sports, or academics. That's where the modeling process actually became very, very powerful. So just now we're going just a little bit deeper. So NLP, so N stands for neuro or mindset, L stands for linguistics or language, and P stands for programs or patterns of behavior. And so what we do thereby with NLP work is we use language or linguistics. We talk to someone, that's all we really do, is just talk, to affect their neurology or their mindset, to help them change underlying pattern of behavior that they actually might want to get rid of, example, smoking, or they might want to improve, for example, in an area. For example, with, you mentioned before our business program, our business success mindset program, that's really all about helping business owners improve their mindset and thereby improve, their performance, productivity, and profits. So it sort of works in both sort of ways.
Amazing. That's amazing. And, I do the similar work to you as well. And I know a lot about NLP, and it fascinates me. Human science fascinates me all the time, learning and growing as a person, and it's fantastic. Now, behavior is probably the number one thing that people don't actually recognize what they're doing, because a lot of people are on autopilot quite a lot. So when we talk about, as you know, and as I know, the unconscious mind, how do people know what behavior they're actually doing? How do you bring that out of them?
Well, it's interesting just at this very point. We often talk about, the smoking trance, the eating trance, the drinking trance. And what we're really talking about here, which is exactly what you were just hinting at, Sean, was, people unconsciously doing these behaviors. And I can relate to this myself, and I'll give a great example. This is my own personal example, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I know, for example, when I'm unconsciously eating. For example, let's just say I'm working on the computer, punching away at whatever I'm doing. If I've got like a bag of chips there right next to me, I know I will demolish those chips and I won't even be aware of that I'm actually doing it, because it's purely an unconscious, I would call that sort of trance eating. My conscious awareness is on something else, whether it's the TV or the computer or else, and I'm just sort of, going away with my food.
Yes, yep. I think we all can relate to that.
But it applies to drinking. It applies to, smoking. It applies to most of these types of behaviors. And so one of the first things that we need to help our clients do is to help bring that behavior back to their conscious awareness. And once they've got that awareness, they can then start to take steps to actually change that automatic response to that trigger. And I often use the example, of Pavlov's dogs, where they were conditioned over time. Their owner used to, ring the bell every time they got fed. And after enough times, he just rang the bell and they were just salivating all over the place.
Right.
And I think, the older we get, whether we like to admit it or not, we develop all these, automatic patterns of behavior, which may have served us really well, a long time ago when we were a lot younger, but we now do them without thought. We don't question their validity, whether they're still useful to us or not. We just do them. And so again, many of my clients, it's a pattern, it's a process of learning, of self-learning about why are they doing what they do? Do they really need to do this? I'll give you another example of a current client I have. She's working with me on weight loss. And she used to consume vast quantities of ice cream and soft drinks.
Mm.
And so what she's come to realize as we've been going through our sessions together is that it's been a purely an automatic thing that she's been doing. Like, again, watching TV, she'll have a tub while she's just ice cream over and over again because she's actually focusing on the TV.
Mm.
And so what she's become really aware of during our program is all these little triggers that are occurring, throughout the day, where she's starting to do these undesired patterns of behavior, but now which no longer serve her. And she's actually found it really easy to let go of the ice cream and the soft drinks because she's just become so attuned or so critically aware to how she was just responding without thought to all these triggers, but realizing these responses no longer serve her moving forward. And of
Well,
course, when you add tools like hypnosis, which also work at the level of the unconscious mind, which is where these habits reside, that just sort of helps accelerate that whole process as well.
Wow, you say accelerate, which is fantastic. And that's a great example that you gave us, because weight loss is very high everywhere in the world. Weight gain and then trying to lose weight. A lot of women, really in particular, they find it really hard. They try all these diets, and even men, they try all these diets and it doesn't work. So with hypnosis, you walk them through it, is that right? And speak to their unconscious mind? How does that actual hypnosis work with?
Yeah. Great question. I suppose, see, from our point of view, all learning, all change, all behavior is unconscious, right? And so when you use tools like NLP and hypnosis, which work on the level of the unconscious mind, you can thereby more quickly change either these undesired patterns of behavior or even beliefs and values which people have held for 20, 30, 40 years. I'll give you another example. We've probably all heard of the term or the saying, it takes between 3 and 4 weeks to change or create a new habit, right?
Yes.
And that's certainly, pretty well correct. You can do it fast if you put reminders everywhere for yourself and that sort of thing. But there's a powerful NLP technique called the swish pattern, which you can actually use to change a pattern of behavior typically within 15 to 30 minutes. It's a very visual process where you're sort of basically programming your unconscious mind and visually saying, I don't want this, I want this, I don't want this, I want this. And you do that multiple times. And because your unconscious mind is actually very visual in how it sort of communicates and operates, it actually helps it change that pattern of behavior much more quickly. And it's very, very suitable or powerful for things like nail biting, for example, teeth grinding. I've got a guy who's having an issue with thumb sucking. And this is going to be also very powerful for that as well, because it's an unconscious behavior. He's not consciously thinking, oh, I'm stressed. Like it's just, how it works.
Wow. So this is an adult man still sucking his thumb. Right. Okay. Right. So things like that can be an issue for adults. Yeah, for sure.
I had, for example, a lady, and if you actually heard of this, this blew me away, Sean.
Yeah.
I actually had a female see me, this is probably about a year and a bit ago, and she was sleep eating, not sleepwalking, but sleep eating.
Oh, yes, I've heard something like that before. What happened to her?
I never heard of this before, and I thought, is this just making this up? I'm sure she must be making this up. And if you look on YouTube, there are a number of, examples of people actually who have filmed, while they were sleeping. They sort of show that how they get up and they sort of eat. So actually, we were able to help her break that sort of pattern to sort of get more in control with her sleep eating, behavior, which is again totally unconscious. But again, once you use the right tools, it can help make that process so much easier for the person.
Wow, fantastic. That is amazing. And the tools do work, and what you do is incredible. So you work with men and women, I take it?
Yeah, I even work with children as well. I actually work, probably youngest I've had so far is about 14.
14.
And that was on a phobia. working with this particular girl. She had a vomiting phobia.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
But with her, for example, I had her mother was there with her
Mm-hmm.
at all times, and we just sort of went through a couple of, I suppose, simplified processes with her, because of course, younger people actually have a bit more difficulty focusing,
Yeah.
for longer. We sort of broke up into about 3 or 4 little mini sessions for her,
Mm-hmm.
but we're able to help her slowly get over that challenge. And she had someone just recently, in fact, he also had a needle phobia. And this particular gentleman, it was so severe that he kept putting off very sort of serious operations that he really had to have. He just kept, no, I don't want to have this,
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and it got to a point where he had to have this procedure. I think it was something to do with his wisdom teeth.
Mm.
And so he called me in on the 11th hour, a couple of days beforehand, saying, "You got to help me out with this." And so we used a couple of powerful NLP processes that helped him with that. And he found the procedure worked so well that he did the actual operation, and he thanked me. So this was actually life-changing for him. I
Wow.
just can't thank you enough for
That's
helping him.
fantastic. Oh my gosh. So it is such a powerful tool, and goes deeper than a lot of therapies, doesn't it?
Well, again, and I mean, we still use a lot of language techniques, which of course are more conscious.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they can also be, if used properly, they can also become unconscious as well.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're working with both levels of the mind, particularly the unconscious mind, where a lot of these, limiting beliefs are, these habits, these emotions are, often you can sort of, break through more quickly and more easily than, in fact, using, conscious-based techniques. For example, when I learned this particular NLP phobia process, I was told, in fact, by the trainer I'm going to be seeing this afternoon, he said, Ian, conventional techniques on a phobia, will typically take months and months and months
Mm.
of desensitization. It could be like drugs involved, and it could only be sort of partially successful.
Mm.
But with this particular technique, you can often help someone, within about a 15 to 30-minute period, either totally overcome the phobia or dramatically reduce it to the point where they're not paralyzed by the actual experience. I had another lady talking about phobias just for a sec. She actually had a major flight phobia.
Yeah,
And
that's a
so,
big one.
yeah, and so she had like a big trip planned to Hawaii, but I think it was about 4 or 5 months later. So with her, I said, okay, let's do this process. But what I want you to do afterwards is to sort of build up to this Hawaii flight. Just take a couple of short flights within Australia. Maybe fly to Tassie, a nice short flight, then to Adelaide, then sort of, just to sort of get used to the process, so you get to the point where you can then sort of just say, this is going to be a piece of cake.
Mm.
And SMS'd me later saying, Ian, I've just flown to Brisbane, I think it was, from Melbourne, in the dark, one of my worst fears. And I actually, went through, it was not an issue at all. And now I can't wait for my flight to Hawaii in April. Like, she was really happy.
Fantastic.
It was pretty
That's
awesome.
that's incredible. You've shared so many great experiences that you've had with your clients. Have you ever had a client that they come to you and say it hasn't worked?
Occasionally, there are people actually sometimes we can't help. Like, for example, some of the clients that we have to be very careful with, Sean, are people that you have, different types of mental health illnesses. For
Mm-hmm.
example, things like schizophrenia, or like psychotic type episodes. We have to be very careful here. People actually here will actually, get their psychiatrist or GP to give us a referral, just to make sure that, in their opinion, they feel that they'll be able to benefit from our therapies. Because if they say no, then we wouldn't work with that client.
Mm.
Other clients we have difficulty with are people who just don't listen to our instructions, which you might say, that's pretty weird. Why would they come to see you in the first place? But it sort of still shakes my head to this day. People who come to see me, you know, I give them, you know, instructions on what they need to do both during the session and also afterwards.
Yeah.
And they don't follow them and then wonder, well, why didn't this sort of work? And you said, well,
Yeah.
obviously.
It is, and that's actually the biggest thing, isn't it? If somebody's listening to instructions or listening really intently to what your words are, then it will work. But if you're not listening, I find that just like you, it won't work for them. Because really, at the end of the day, you are the instructor. Would you call yourself sort of like the instructor, but at the end of the day, it's their way to
Yes.
change. They need to change themselves.
I call myself a guide. I'm guiding them through the
The guide,
process.
yeah.
In a therapeutic setting, actually, going back to hypnosis, it actually is always self-hypnosis. You know, I'm sort of guiding the client to them hypnotizing themselves. And thereby, by doing that, of course, they're always in full power and control throughout the whole process. And then, you know, they can stop if they want to have a bit of a break. They're sort of driving the bus. I'm just there to help them through the process.
Fantastic. Yes, and we all need a guide in our life, don't we, Ian?
Or guide, coach, whatever you want to call it. Yes, totally. You know, I think, you know, it's actually a famous saying, something along the lines of, this is like it's one of the famous NLP pioneers. I think it was Robert Dilts. I can't remember who actually it was. And he said, he was talking about being one's own therapist.
Oh, yes.
You know, it's okay for a while, but then you get to a point where you start to reinforce your own delusions, and then so it doesn't work too well at all.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
you know, I think you can get to a certain point, you know, with applying these techniques to yourself. And in fact, I think it's important that we do. You know, I regularly, you know, use the swish pattern, other patterns that I, you know, use with my clients, because I think it's so important for us to be able to, you know, walk the talk rather than just talk the talk. And so, you know, I consistently utilize the same processes that I, you know, use with my clients. And even, for example, with our weight loss program, I actually don't want to lose weight, but, you know, I think often they're sort of very good for your health, general health anyway. So I will actually thereby take them on myself and get very familiar with them. So I can then talk to my clients, you know, with a bit of experience and say, look, you know, this is what I've done. It worked for me this way. So I recommend you might want to try this because it worked well for me like that. So, you know, it's very important, I think, that we can sort of talk from a, you know, a place of experience and, you know, having done the techniques ourselves.
Oh, for sure. And that's actually where I was going to go. I was going to ask you what technique on yourself worked the best for you, or did you have a coach to do it on you? Did you have a quit smoking? Were you a smoker? Do you have a story?
Great question. So I actually love, I do it, in fact, both ways. So some things I will do myself. Other things, you know, I will do with other therapists. So, for example, I just recently learned a new program, which is all relating to timeline therapy or a variation thereof to help, people actually get rid of all the negative emotions and baggage from their life, you know, to move forward, you know, in a much more empowered way. And with that, we were asked to practice on each other, you know, and it was an amazing process. You know, I worked with this young lady. We've been working together now probably for about 10 to 12 weeks. And it's just been such a liberating process to get rid of, you know, all this anger and, you know, all this sort of grief and, you know, all this sort of, you know, limiting beliefs and anxiety and stuff. And it's been phenomenal. And I just feel so much lighter as a result, you know. We're working on a particular, you know, couple of really sort of sensitive issues, you know. For example, you know, I had a really sick pet. I had to sort of, you know, prepare myself that, you know, we were potentially going to have to sort of, you know, say goodbye to her. And I found it really difficult. But she helped me through this process. And although my pet's actually now almost fully recovered, which is awesome.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah.
But I felt so much more at ease with the whole concept of, you know, that whole, that really painful part of, having to sort of, take her to the vet and just sort of being with her, just sort of letting her go, in a nice sort of, pain-free way. But, it was a real struggle for me beforehand, but having gone through the process, it just helped me feel so much better about it, be more at peace in a sense. So I will, work with others. In fact, I'll give you another example. Actually, I was, one of the girls I do a lot of presentation work with, she's sort of gone into other areas that I don't sort of dabble in. And one of them was to do with past life regression. And and she was actually doing this program, and she needed to like have a couple of a certain number of hours of practice. I said, Ian, would you like to meet my subjects? And I thought, oh, I don't know about this, but anyway, let's give it a go. But anyway, so we did this process, and I only mentioned only because one of the fascinating things about hypnosis when you experience it is that you have a process called time distortion. And because you're so, sort of ingrained in the process, you're visualizing, you're sort of, really relaxed, and it's just a beautiful process, you lose all concept of time. And so it might actually go for a whole hour, but it feels like 5-10 minutes have gone past. That was just really amazing. And so with her, this took about 2.5 hours, and it felt like it was only 20 minutes. And I thought, 2.5 hours? You've got to be joking.
Wow.
But it was just an amazing experience.
Yeah.
Well, I survived, thank goodness.
Oh, thank goodness. That's fantastic.
It was just a nice thing just to sort of experience, because I think it is important to experience these techniques, but also in the context of a therapist-client relationship too. You sort of see it from a different angle.
Yeah, and that's great, because that'll be great for our listeners to hear this, and for people that are viewing to hear what you're saying, because, we're all human, and we've all gone through things like anger, sadness, grief, and hurt, and all those emotions. So it's good that we practice what we preach, as you said. And I love that you do hypnosis, and that's fantastic that you actually have a center in Melbourne, NLP Hypnosis Center. And you have something for the listeners today that I can put down, and they can click on the link.
Yes, I sort of always love to sort of, give value to whenever I'm speaking anywhere. And so what I've prepared is in fact, two things. Firstly, some really great tips on managing and reducing anxiety. And then in with that, I've actually also got a really powerful stress reduction, deep relaxation hypnosis recording, which I'd love to also leave for you to just give to listeners, anyone that you'd like to experience hypnosis firsthand. I've actually got some great feedback with this. In fact, I think actually you'll be listening to this yourself, Sean.
I was just going to say, and I wanted to tell all the listeners that I did the hypnosis center in the middle of the day and to relax my mind, and it was fantastic. When you do hypnosis on other people, it's different when you're doing it on yourself, and it was great, and I highly recommend it. So thank you for giving that value to the listeners today.
Just an interesting point just on what you were just saying there, just a bit of an aside. It's amazing how when I'm doing work with my clients and I'm going through the hypnosis process, that I find that the more relaxed I become, the more my client becomes. It's like I'm leading them through the process. So I often will finish and I'm just so relaxed. I just go into this with them. I just feel fantastic. So it's amazing how you both benefit from the experience working together. It's just awesome.
Exactly, which is amazing. So that's why you do what you do, is it?
Exactly. I mean, when you sort of get these text messages saying, Ian, look, I've not smoked for the last 3 years. I've saved, $30,000. I feel so much better. Wow, that was life-changing. Thank you so much. And you think, wow, just to be a part of that, that's made my day today.
Oh, it's amazing. Giving lots of value all over the world, I'd say. Do you do work with clients all over the world, or just in Melbourne, in Australia?
No, I work also online. So I actually, for example, ran that business success mindset program last year with clients all over the world. They were all over Europe, parts of was Arabia, I think it was, or in the Middle East somewhere. We had clients from everywhere, and it worked exceptionally well. With Zoom technologies, it's just so easy to do nowadays.
Fantastic. That is great. Well, I have all your details, so I will put them in the links, and so everyone can contact you, male, female, quit smoking, less drinking, less anxiety, and also put the link for your hypnosis recording. So thank you very much, Ian, for being on my podcast today. It's been a pleasure, and I hope you have a fantastic day.
It's great to be here again. Thank you again so much for the invite. And again, thanks guys for listening. And I hope you get a lot of value from the tips and the recording and today's presentation too.
Yes, fantastic. Well, we'll see you later. It's The Real Deal. Sean Matthews. We'll speak to you soon. Bye now.
Bye now.